The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council shimmered with holographic displays showing star systems and trade routes that stretched across half the known galaxy. Princess Lyra Velshera stood near the viewing platform, her crystalline skin catching the light from a dozen different suns. She wore the formal robes of her station, deep purple threaded with silver that marked her as fourth in the galactic hierarchy of power. Her father, Emperor Theron, sat on the raised dais beside the human delegation. Lyra watched as he signed the final documents, sealing the marriage alliance that would bind their empire to the newcomers. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 300 years ago, barely a blink in the timeline of civilized space. Yet they had proven themselves capable traders and reliable allies. Lyra expected to meet her future husband today. She had studied the human delegation for weeks. Ambassador Victoria Hayes seemed the obvious choice. The woman commanded respect in every negotiation, her silver hair and sharp eyes marking her as someone of importance. Or perhaps it would be one of the military officers who accompanied the delegation, men and women who carried themselves with the confidence of proven warriors. Instead, Ambassador Hayes approached with a young man Lyra had barely noticed during the proceedings. He was unremarkable by human standards, with brown hair and quiet features. He wore simple diplomatic clothing without any medals or honors. His posture was relaxed, his expression neutral. "Princess Lyra," Ambassador Hayes said with a formal bow. "May I present Ethan Crawford? He has agreed to accept the terms of the marriage alliance." Lyra stared at the human. This was an insult. They were offering her an assistant, someone so low in their hierarchy that she had not even bothered to learn his name. Her skin flickered with a faint red tint, the Zytherian equivalent of a blush of anger. "Is this some kind of joke?" she asked, her voice sharp. Ethan Crawford stepped forward. He met her eyes without flinching, without showing any emotion at all. "I understand your concern, Princess. I assure you this arrangement has been carefully considered by both our governments." His voice was calm and measured. There was no apology in it, no explanation. Just simple acceptance of the situation. Emperor Theron raised a hand before Lyra could protest further. "The alliance is sealed, daughter. The humans have chosen their representative, and we have accepted. You will honor this agreement." Lyra bit back her anger. She was a princess of the Zytherian Empire. She would not show weakness in front of the other species watching this ceremony. "Of course, father," she said. The wedding took place 3 weeks later. It was a grand ceremony attended by representatives from 40 different worlds. Lyra wore the traditional white and gold of Zytherian brides. Ethan wore a formal human suit, black with a simple tie. He spoke his vows clearly and without hesitation. His hand was steady when he placed the ring on her finger. Throughout the ceremony, Lyra watched him for any sign of nervousness or excitement. There was nothing. He performed each ritual exactly as instructed, his face a mask of polite attention. When the ceremony ended and they were declared bonded, he bowed to her formally and stepped back. At the reception, Lyra was forced to smile and accept congratulations from dozens of dignitaries. Ethan stood beside her, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries with the same calm demeanor he had shown since the moment they met. He never sought attention, never tried to impress anyone. He simply existed in the space beside her, quiet and unremarkable. When the reception finally ended, servants escorted them to the royal wing of the palace. Ethan's belongings had already been moved into the suite of rooms designated for the princess and her consort. Lyra stood in the main chamber, still wearing her wedding dress, and watched as Ethan examined the space. "The accommodations are generous," he said quietly. "Thank you. You can sleep in the guest room," Lyra said coldly. "I have no interest in sharing a bed with you." Ethan nodded. "As you wish, Princess." He picked up one of his bags and walked toward the guest room without another word. Lyra expected him to argue or at least show disappointment. Instead, he simply accepted her decision and closed the door behind him. She stood alone in the main chamber, confused and frustrated. This marriage was supposed to strengthen her empire. Instead, she felt as if the humans had sent her a placeholder, someone to fill a role without any real substance. Over the following days, Ethan settled into a routine. He woke before dawn and disappeared for hours. Lyra assumed he was exploring the palace or meeting with other humans. He always returned in time for formal meals and state functions, where he sat beside her in silence unless directly addressed. When people spoke to him, he responded with courtesy but offered nothing beyond what was asked. At night, he retired to his room early. Lyra never heard any noise from his quarters. He did not entertain guests or cause any trouble. He was, in every way, the perfect invisible consort. And that made her angrier than any argument would have. "Does he speak at all when you are alone?" her friend Lady Sarah asked one afternoon. They were taking tea in the palace gardens, and Sarah had been curious about the mysterious human. "Only when necessary," Lyra said. "He is polite, formal, and completely uninteresting." "Perhaps he is nervous," Sarah suggested. "Humans are still new to galactic society. He might be overwhelmed." Lyra shook her head. "He does not seem nervous. He seems bored." That evening, there was a formal dinner with visiting diplomats from the Outer Rim. Ethan sat beside Lyra at the head table, dressed in another simple suit. He ate his meal slowly and responded to questions with brief, factual answers. When the conversation turned to trade agreements, he listened without comment. When someone asked about Earth, he described it in basic terms without any personal stories or emotion. Lyra watched him throughout the meal. She tried to find some crack in his composure, some hint of what he was really thinking. There was nothing. He was like a statue that had learned to eat and speak. After 2 months of this routine, Lyra decided she had endured enough. She confronted Ethan in their shared quarters one evening. "Why did you agree to this marriage?" she demanded. "You clearly have no interest in me or in your role here. You go through the motions like a programmed machine. Why accept this duty if you care nothing about it?" Ethan looked up from the book he was reading. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. It might have been surprise or sadness or something else entirely. Then it was gone, and his face returned to its usual calm mask. "I apologize if my behavior has disappointed you, Princess," he said quietly. "I am trying to fulfill my obligations without causing problems." "That is not an answer," Lyra said. Ethan closed his book and stood. "You are right. I will try to be more engaged." He walked to his room and closed the door. Lyra wanted to scream. She wanted him to argue or explain or show any emotion at all. Instead, she was left standing alone again, wondering why the humans had sent her this empty shell of a man. 6 months passed in the same unchanging pattern. Ethan woke before dawn each day and vanished into the vast corridors of the palace. Lyra tried to ignore it at first, but her curiosity eventually won out. She asked the palace guards where he went. "The training grounds, Princess," one of the guards told her. "He spends several hours there each morning, then visits the human embassy before returning for the midday meal." Training grounds. Lyra supposed that made sense. Humans were known to value physical fitness. Perhaps it was his way of dealing with the stress of being in an unfamiliar place. She thought nothing more of it. Life in the palace continued as normal. Lyra attended council meetings and diplomatic functions. Ethan accompanied her when protocol required it, standing silently at her side. He had started to make small efforts to be more present, as he had promised. He would ask her about her day occasionally or comment on the weather. But these conversations felt forced, as if he was checking items off a list of duties. One evening, a state dinner was interrupted by urgent news. Lord Kale Vortanes, commander of the Zytherian Defense Fleet, burst into the hall with a grave expression. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing quickly to Emperor Theron, "we have received a distress signal from the mining colony on Vexor 7. Pirates have attacked the settlement. They are demanding ransom and threatening to execute hostages." The Emperor rose from his seat. "How many hostages?" 200 civilians, sir. Mostly miners and their families." Lyra felt her chest tighten. Vexor 7 was an important colony, and those people were under her father's protection. Around the table, the other dinner guests murmured in concern. This was exactly the kind of crisis that could destabilize the region. "Assemble the War Council immediately," Emperor Theron commanded. "We will discuss our response." The dinner guests began to disperse. Lyra stood to follow her father to the war room. Then she noticed Ethan quietly excusing himself from the table. He was walking toward the exit, away from the crisis. Anger flared in her chest. Her people were in danger, and he was simply leaving. She caught up to him in the hallway. "Where are you going?" she demanded. Ethan turned to face her. His expression was still calm, but there was something different in his eyes. A kind of intensity she had not seen before. "I have urgent matters to attend to, Princess," he said. "Urgent matters?" Lyra repeated, her voice rising. "There are 200 people being held hostage, and you cannot even be bothered to stay for the emergency meeting? What could possibly be more important than that?" For a moment, Ethan seemed to consider telling her something. Then he simply bowed his head. "I apologize. You are right. I will return shortly." He walked away before she could respond. Lyra stood in the hallway, seething with frustration. This was the final insult. Her people were in danger, and her husband could not even pretend to care. She returned to the war room where her father and his advisors were already planning a response. Lord Kale suggested sending a battle fleet to intimidate the pirates, but the Emperor worried about the hostages. Any aggressive move might cause the pirates to execute their prisoners. The debate continued for hours. Lyra participated in the discussion, offering suggestions and asking questions. But in the back of her mind, she kept thinking about Ethan's strange behavior. Where had he gone? What was so important that he would abandon a crisis like this? When she finally returned to her quarters late that night, she found Ethan sitting in the main chamber reading a book. He looked up when she entered. "How did the meeting go?" he asked. Lyra stared at him. He was asking about the meeting as if he had not walked out in the middle of a crisis. As if his absence had been perfectly normal. "We are still deciding on a course of action," she said coldly. "The situation is delicate. We cannot risk the hostages." Ethan nodded. "I am sure your father will make the right choice." That was it. No explanation, no apology for leaving. Lyra turned and went to her bedroom without another word. She was done trying to understand this man. The next morning, Lyra woke to shocking news. The hostages on Vexor 7 had been rescued during the night. The pirate ship had been disabled, and the criminals were in custody. No hostages had been harmed. No Zytherian forces had been deployed. "How is that possible?" Lyra asked Lord Kale when she saw him in the palace hallway. The commander looked puzzled. "We are not certain, Princess. The colony reports that an unmarked ship arrived just before dawn. A small team neutralized the pirates in less than 10 minutes. They freed the hostages and disappeared before we could make contact." "An unmarked ship? Who would do that?" Lord Kale shook his head. "We do not know. But whoever they were, they saved a lot of lives." Lyra thought about the timing. The rescue had happened just hours after Ethan left the dinner. Could it be connected? No, that was ridiculous. Ethan was just a diplomatic assistant. He could not possibly have anything to do with a military operation. Still, she decided to have him followed. She ordered palace security to track his movements discreetly. For the next few weeks, the guards reported the same routine. Ethan visited the training grounds each morning, then stopped at the human embassy, then returned to the palace. There was nothing unusual about any of it. 2 months later, another crisis emerged. Intelligence reports indicated that a terrorist group was planning an attack on the royal family. The palace security was increased dramatically. Guards were posted at every entrance and exit. All visitors were screened multiple times. Lyra expected Ethan to show some concern about the threat. Instead, he seemed completely unconcerned. He continued his daily routine without any change. He did not ask questions about the security measures or express worry about the danger. Does he not understand the situation? Lyra asked Lady Sarah over tea one afternoon. There are people who want to kill us, and he acts as if nothing is happening. Perhaps he trusts the security, Sarah suggested. Or perhaps he is trying not to show fear. Lyra shook her head. It is not about fear. It is about appropriate concern. Anyone with sense would be at least a little worried. That evening, Claire Morrison visited from the Human Cultural Liaison Office. She had come to check on Ethan and see how he was adjusting to palace life. Lyra watched them talk in the main chamber. Claire seemed nervous, constantly glancing around as if worried about being overheard. When she spoke to Ethan, she kept her voice low. Lyra could not hear what they were saying, but she noticed something strange. At one point, Claire bowed her head slightly when speaking to Ethan. It was a gesture of respect, the kind usually reserved for superiors. Why would a liaison officer show such deference to a simple diplomatic assistant? When Claire left, Lyra confronted Ethan. What did she want? Just checking on me, Ethan said calmly. Making sure I am settling in well. She bowed to you, Lyra said. Why would she do that? Ethan paused. Did she? I did not notice. It was a lie. Lyra knew it was a lie. Ethan noticed everything. He might pretend to be absent-minded, but she had seen the way his eyes tracked every movement in a room. He was always aware of everything happening around him. Who are you really? She asked quietly. Ethan met her eyes. For just a second, she saw something behind his calm mask. Something old and tired and maybe a little sad. Then it was gone. I am your husband, he said simply. That is all. Lyra became obsessed with uncovering the truth about her husband. She spent hours in the palace archives, searching through records of human diplomatic personnel. Ethan's file was surprisingly thin. It listed his assignment to the ambassador's staff 3 years ago, his basic qualifications, and nothing else. There were no details about his life before joining the diplomatic corps. No family history, no education records, no previous employment. It was as if he had simply appeared 3 years ago, fully formed and ready to work. One afternoon, Lyra was reviewing human military records when she found a reference to something called the Void Walkers. The file was heavily redacted, with most of the information blocked out. What little remained suggested they were some kind of special operations unit. Elite soldiers who conducted classified missions across the galaxy. When Lyra tried to access more information, the system denied her request. The files were restricted to the highest levels of security clearance. Even as a princess, she did not have access. That evening, she asked Ethan about it directly. They were in their quarters after another formal dinner. Ethan was reading, as usual. Lyra sat down across from him. Have you ever heard of the Void Walkers? She asked. Ethan went completely still. He did not look up from his book. He did not move at all. It was the first time Lyra had seen him show such an obvious reaction to anything. Where did you hear that name? He asked quietly. In the archives, Lyra said. There was a reference in a military file. But most of the information was classified. What are they? Ethan closed his book carefully. His face had gone blank again, but his hands were gripping the book tighter than necessary. They are a classified military unit. I cannot discuss them. Cannot or will not. Lyra pressed. Both, Ethan said. He stood and walked to his room, ending the conversation. Lyra sat alone, her mind racing. She had finally gotten a reaction from him. That name meant something. But what? 2 weeks later, Lyra attended a public ceremony in the capital city. She was there to dedicate a new medical center that would serve the lower districts. Ethan accompanied her, as protocol required. They stood on a raised platform while Lyra gave her speech to the gathered crowd. Lyra was midway through her prepared remarks when Ethan suddenly moved. He grabbed her arm and pulled her to the side just as something whistled past where her head had been. There was a sharp crack, and the wall behind them exploded in a shower of fragments. "Get down!" Ethan shouted. He pushed Lyra behind a concrete barrier as more shots rang out. The crowd panicked, people screaming and running in all directions. Lyra's security team rushed forward, trying to shield her. But Ethan was already moving. He sprinted across the platform with impossible speed, dodging between cover points. Lyra saw him drop behind a pillar, then emerge on the other side. 3 attackers were advancing through the crowd, weapons raised. Ethan reached the first attacker before the man could fire again. He moved with a precision that did not seem human. One strike to disarm, another to disable. The attacker went down hard. The second attacker tried to shoot Ethan, but he was already moving. He rolled under the line of fire and came up inside the attacker's guard. Another quick series of movements, and the second attacker collapsed. The third attacker saw what happened and tried to run. Ethan caught him in seconds, bringing him down with a sweep that looked effortless. The entire fight lasted maybe 30 seconds. By the time Lyra's security team reached the attackers, they were all unconscious on the ground. Ethan was already walking back toward Lyra, his expression calm again. There was not even a scratch on him. "Are you hurt, Princess?" he asked. Lyra stared at him. She had never seen anyone move like that. The palace guards were trained warriors, some of the best in the Empire. But they looked like amateurs compared to what she had just witnessed. "How did you do that?" she asked. "Basic training," Ethan said. "All humans receive combat instruction." "That was not basic training," Lyra said. "That was something else entirely." Ethan did not respond. Security surrounded them and began escorting them back to the palace. Throughout the journey, Lyra kept glancing at Ethan. He sat quietly in the transport, looking out the window as if nothing unusual had happened. When they returned to their quarters, Lyra confronted him immediately. "You knew that attack was coming. You moved before the first shot was fired." "How?" "I saw the shooter in the building across the square," Ethan said. "The angle of his weapon made his target clear." "No one else saw him," Lyra said. "My entire security team missed it. You are telling me you just happened to notice?" "I pay attention," Ethan said simply. Lyra stepped closer to him. "What are you? What are you really?" For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. He looked tired suddenly, older than his years. "I am trying to be the person you need me to be," he said quietly. "I am trying to do this right." "By lying to me?" Lyra asked. "By not burdening you with things that do not matter," Ethan said. "My past is not important. Only what I do now." "Your past matters when it affects who you are," Lyra said. "I deserve to know who I married." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "I am sorry. I cannot tell you what you want to know." He walked to his room and closed the door. Lyra stood alone again, but this time she was not confused. She was determined. Whatever secrets Ethan was hiding, she would find them. The next day, Lyra went to Ambassador Victoria Hayes directly. She found the ambassador in her office at the Human Embassy, reviewing trade agreements. "Princess Lyra," Victoria said, standing to greet her. "This is an unexpected visit. How can I help you?" "I want to know about Ethan," Lyra said bluntly. "His real background. Not the sanitized version in his personnel file." Victoria's expression became guarded. "What makes you think there is more to know?" "Because yesterday he moved like a trained killer," Lyra said. "Because he knew an attack was coming before anyone else. Because people who should be his equals treat him with unusual respect. Something is not right, and I want the truth." Victoria sat back down slowly. She seemed to be weighing her words carefully. "I am not authorized to discuss certain aspects of Ethan's background," she said finally. "Those matters are classified at the highest levels." "I am his wife," Lyra said. "I am the princess of an allied empire. Surely I have the right to know who shares my home." Victoria was silent for a moment. Then she leaned forward. "All I can tell you is this. Ethan volunteered for this assignment. He specifically requested it. That should tell you something about his intentions. Why would he want to marry someone he did not know?" Lyra asked. "Perhaps because he wanted a different life," Victoria said quietly. "Perhaps because he was tired of the one he had." Before Lyra could ask more, Victoria stood. "I have said more than I should already. If you want to know more about Ethan, you should ask him yourself. But I will say this. He is a good man, Princess. Whatever else he is, that much is true." Lyra left the embassy with more questions than answers. But one thing was becoming clear. Ethan was not what he seemed. And whatever he was hiding, it was something big. 3 months passed. Lyra watched Ethan more carefully now, noticing things she had missed before. The way he moved was always efficient, never wasting motion. The way his eyes constantly scanned every room he entered, marking exits and threats. The way he positioned himself between her and any potential danger without ever seeming to do so deliberately. He was protecting her. He had been protecting her all along. She just had not realized it. Then came the day everything changed. Alarms blared throughout the palace in the middle of the night. Lyra woke to the sound of explosions in the distance. She rushed from her bedroom to find Ethan already in the main chamber, fully dressed, standing by the window. "What is happening?" she asked. "Fleet attack," Ethan said calmly. "Large rebel force. They came out of hyperspace 20 minutes ago." "How do you know that?" Lyra asked. The official alerts had not even been broadcast yet. Ethan did not answer. He was watching something in the sky, his expression focused. A moment later, palace guards burst into the room. "Princess, you must come with us immediately," the captain said. "The Emperor has ordered you to the secure bunker." Lyra followed the guards, with Ethan close behind. They hurried through the palace corridors toward the emergency shelter deep underground. All around them, staff and officials were rushing to their designated safe areas. The sound of distant explosions grew louder. When they reached the war room adjacent to the bunker, Emperor Theron was there with his military advisors. Lord Kale stood before a massive holographic display showing the space around the planet. Red markers indicated enemy ships. There were dozens of them. "Father," Lyra said, "what is the situation?" Emperor Theron looked grim. "A rebel fleet has emerged from the outer rim. They have been planning this for months. Our defense forces are outnumbered 3-1. "Can we hold them?" Lyra asked. Lord Kale shook his head. "Not without significant casualties. We have sent emergency requests to all allied systems, but help will not arrive in time." Lyra felt a cold weight in her chest. This was it. Everything her family had built for generations was about to be destroyed. She looked at the display, watching the red markers advance on their positions. Then she heard a familiar voice. "Your Majesty, if I may." Everyone turned. Ethan stood near the entrance to the war room. He had never spoken in a military briefing before. Lord Kale looked annoyed at the interruption. "This is not the time for diplomatic input," Kale said sharply. "I am not offering diplomatic input," Ethan said calmly. "I am offering a tactical solution." Before anyone could respond, another voice spoke from behind them. "Let him speak." Lyra turned to see a human officer entering the war room. He wore the uniform of an Earth Fleet admiral, his chest covered in medals and honors. He was older, with gray hair and the bearing of someone who had commanded in countless battles. Palace guards moved to intercept him, but he showed them credentials that made them step aside immediately. "Who are you?" Emperor Theron demanded. "Fleet Admiral Richard Stone, Earth Special Operations Command," the man said. He walked directly to Ethan, and to Lyra's shock, he saluted. "Commander, we are ready when you give the order." "Commander." The word hung in the air. Lyra stared at Ethan, her mind trying to process what she had just heard. "Explain this," Emperor Theron said, his voice dangerous. "Why is a human admiral calling my daughter's husband by a military rank?" Ethan looked at Lyra. For the first time since she had met him, she saw genuine regret in his eyes. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "I wanted to tell you, but operational security required silence." He turned to face the Emperor. "My name is Ethan Crawford. I hold the rank of Commander in Earth Special Operations Command. Specifically, I lead a unit called the Void Walkers." Lord Kale went pale. "The Void Walkers are real? I thought they were a myth." "We prefer it that way," Ethan said. He walked to the holographic display and began manipulating the controls with practiced ease. "Admiral Stone, status report." "All operatives are in position, sir," Stone said. "We have been embedded in the rebel fleet for 6 weeks. Awaiting your command." Lyra felt dizzy. Embedded in the rebel fleet for 6 weeks? That meant Ethan had known about this attack for at least that long. He had been preparing for it while pretending to be nothing more than a quiet consort. "Wait," Emperor Theron said. "You knew this attack was coming? Why did you not warn us?" "We needed the rebels to commit fully," Ethan said. "If we had warned you and you had reinforced your defenses, they would have suspected a leak and called off the attack. Then they would have just tried again later when we were not in position." This way, we end the threat permanently. He turned to face the Emperor directly. Your Majesty, I have 12 Void Walkers embedded in the rebel fleet. They are positioned on critical ships throughout their formation. If you give me permission to act, I can neutralize this threat within the hour with minimal casualties to your forces. The Emperor stared at him. 12 soldiers can destroy a fleet of that size? Yes, Ethan said simply. Lord Kale shook his head in disbelief. That is impossible. Even the best soldiers could not accomplish such a thing. The Voidwalkers are not normal soldiers, Admiral Stone said. They are enhanced operatives trained from childhood for exactly this kind of mission. Commander Crawford has led operations on 70 different worlds over the past 15 years. He has never failed a mission. Lyra looked at Ethan with new eyes. This quiet man who read books in their quarters and avoided attention was actually one of the most dangerous individuals in the galaxy. Everything about him had been a lie. Or had it? Why accept the marriage assignment? She asked quietly. If you are so important to your military, why waste time playing the role of a consort? Ethan turned to her. Because we had intelligence that this rebellion was being planned against your father's throne. The marriage alliance gave me the perfect cover to be close to the palace and coordinate the operation. But it was not a waste of time, Lyra. I volunteered for this assignment specifically because I wanted it. So the marriage was just part of the mission, Lyra said bitterly. No, Ethan said firmly. The mission provided the opportunity. But I accepted it because I wanted a life beyond being a weapon. I thought maybe, if I could protect you and help your empire, I could also learn to be something more than what I was made to be. Before Lyra could respond, another explosion rocked the palace. The holographic display showed the rebel fleet advancing rapidly. Your Majesty, Ethan said urgently, I need your decision now. Do I have permission to engage? Emperor Theron looked at his military advisors, then at the advancing fleet on the display. Finally, he looked at Ethan. Do what you must, Commander. Save my people. Ethan nodded. He touched a device on his wrist and spoke into it. All units, this is Crawford. Execute Operation Dark Silence. I say again, execute Dark Silence. On the holographic display, Lyra watched in amazement as red markers began winking out one by one. Rebel ships lost power or veered off course. Explosions bloomed in the space where command vessels had been moments before. The coordinated attack dissolved into chaos. Ethan stood at the display, calmly issuing orders to his scattered team. His voice was different now. Harder. More focused. This was the real Ethan Crawford. Not the quiet consort, but the commander who had operated in shadows across the galaxy. And Lyra realized with a mixture of awe and sadness that she had never really known her husband at all. The battle lasted exactly 40 minutes. Lyra watched from the war room as Ethan coordinated his team with surgical precision. Each Void Walker had been positioned on a critical ship in the rebel fleet. When Ethan gave the signal, they struck simultaneously. Power systems failed on command vessels. Navigation controls locked on support ships. Weapons arrays went offline across the entire fleet. The rebels tried to respond, but they were fighting an invisible enemy that was already inside their defenses. Within 20 minutes, half their fleet was disabled. Within 40, the rest had surrendered. Ethan stood at the holographic display, his voice never rising above a calm monotone as he directed his operatives. He called out ship designations and target priorities with the ease of someone reading a grocery list. When the last rebel vessel powered down, he simply said, All units, secure your positions and await extraction. Good work. The war room was silent. Lord Kale stared at the display in disbelief. The Emperor sat heavily in his chair, looking as if he had aged 10 years in the past hour. Admiral Stone stood beside Ethan, reviewing casualty reports on a datapad. Zytherian casualties? The Emperor asked. Minimal, Your Majesty, Lord Kale reported, still sounding stunned. 3 patrol ships damaged. No fatalities. The rebel fleet never reached weapons range of the planet. Human casualties? Lyra asked, looking at Ethan. None, Admiral Stone said. All operatives reporting green status. Emperor Theron stood and walked to Ethan. He studied the human commander for a long moment. "You have saved my empire tonight." "I am in your debt, Commander Crawford." "I was protecting my wife's family," Ethan said simply. "No debt is owed." "Nevertheless, you have my gratitude," the Emperor said. He paused, then added, "I would like to offer you a position as Supreme Commander of Zytherian Defense Forces. With your skills and experience, you could help protect this empire from future threats." Ethan shook his head. "I appreciate the offer, Your Majesty, but I am retiring from military service. This was my last operation." Admiral Stone looked surprised. "Commander, you cannot be serious. The Void Walkers need you. Earth needs you." "Earth has plenty of capable officers," Ethan said. "I have been a soldier since I was 8 years old, Richard. I have given enough. I want to be something else now." He turned to look at Lyra. "If that is still possible." Lyra stared at him. 8 years old. They had taken him as a child and turned him into a weapon. 4 years, he had fought in shadows across the galaxy, never being allowed to be anything but a soldier. And then he had seen the marriage alliance as a chance to escape that life. Suddenly, all his behavior made sense. The distance he kept from everyone. The walls he had built around himself. He had been trying to learn how to be normal, how to be human in a way that went beyond just biological classification. He had been trying to figure out who he was when he was not killing people. "You lied to me," Lyra said quietly. "Yes," Ethan said. "I am sorry for that. The mission required secrecy. But more than that, I was afraid. I thought if you knew what I really was, you would never be able to see me as anything else. Just another weapon. Just another killer." "And what are you?" Lyra asked. "Really?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I honestly do not know anymore. I have been Commander Crawford for so long that I lost track of just being Ethan. I thought maybe if I could be your husband, if I could have a normal life, I could figure that out. I wanted to try." Lyra walked to him. She thought about the past months. The quiet mornings when he disappeared to train, keeping his skills sharp because that was all he had ever known. The way he attended state dinners and pretended to be interested in politics when he was probably thinking about threat assessments and security protocols. The way he had pulled her out of the path of that assassin's bullet without hesitation. He had been protecting her all along. But more than that, he had been trying to build something new. Something beyond the soldier he had been forced to become. "I want to start over," Lyra said. "Our marriage began with lies and secrets. I want to try again, with honesty this time. Can we do that?" Ethan looked at her with something like hope in his eyes. "I would like that very much." "Then tell me about Earth," Lyra said. "The real Earth. Not the diplomatic version. Tell me about where you grew up, what you remember before the military took you." Ethan smiled. It was a small smile, uncertain and fragile, but it was genuine. "I grew up near the ocean," he said quietly. "I remember the sound of waves at night. The smell of salt air. My mother used to take me to the beach on weekends." He stopped, as if surprised by the memory. "I had forgotten that. I have not thought about those days in years." "Tell me more," Lyra said gently. Emperor Theron cleared his throat. "Perhaps you two should continue this conversation in private. Lord Kale and I have much work to do securing the captured rebel forces." Lyra nodded. She took Ethan's hand and led him from the war room. Behind them, she heard Admiral Stone speaking quietly to the Emperor about extraction procedures for the Voidwalker team. But that did not matter right now. What mattered was the man walking beside her, finally allowing himself to be something more than a weapon. They returned to their quarters. Lyra made tea while Ethan sat on the couch, looking more uncertain than she had ever seen him. When she handed him a cup, he accepted it with a quiet thank you. "I have questions," Lyra said, sitting beside him. "I will answer them," Ethan said. "All of them. No more secrets. How did you end up in the Voidwalkers?" Ethan stared into his tea. "Earth went through unification wars about 200 years ago. Different nations fought for control. In the chaos, military programs were created to produce elite soldiers. Children were identified early for genetic markers that suggested enhanced potential. I was one of them. They took me when I was 8 and trained me to be a soldier. That is horrible, Lyra said softly. It was necessary at the time, Ethan said. Or that is what they told us. By the time Earth unified and joined the galactic community, the Void Walker program was too valuable to dismantle. We became humanity's hidden shield, operating in secret to protect human interests across the galaxy. How many missions have you completed? I stopped counting after 100, Ethan said. Infiltrations, extractions, asset protection, threat elimination. I have been doing this for 20 years. I am 30 years old, and I have spent most of my life fighting. Lyra reached out and took his hand. And now? Now I want to learn what it means to live, Ethan said. Not just survive or complete missions. Actually live. I want to figure out who I am when no one is giving me orders or sending me to fight. I want to be your husband. Not a soldier pretending to be a husband. The real thing. That is going to take time, Lyra said. For both of us. I need to learn to trust you again. You need to learn to be yourself. I know, Ethan said. But I am willing to try if you are. Lyra smiled. Then we start tomorrow. Fresh beginning. You teach me about Earth, and I will show you what it means to truly belong somewhere. To have a home instead of just a safe house between missions. Ethan smiled back. This time, the smile reached his eyes. I would like that. They sat together in comfortable silence, drinking their tea and watching the sun rise over the palace gardens through the window. Outside, somewhere in the shadows of the palace grounds, the remaining Void Walkers stood guard one final time, protecting their commander as he took his first real steps toward a life beyond war. 3 months later, Lyra stood in the palace gardens watching Ethan work with some of the younger palace guards. He had agreed to help train them in defensive techniques, not as a soldier, but as someone teaching others how to protect what mattered to them. She saw him demonstrate a blocking move, then carefully correct a guard stance. He was patient and encouraging, nothing like the cold efficiency he had shown during the battle. When the session ended, Ethan walked over to her. He was smiling more often now. Small smiles, but they were real. How did it go? Lyra asked. Good, Ethan said. They are learning quickly. Give them another month and they will be quite capable. You enjoy teaching, Lyra observed. I do, Ethan said, sounding surprised. I never thought I would. But there is something satisfying about helping others improve rather than just completing objectives. They walked together through the gardens. Ethan had started pointing out plants and asking about their origins. He was curious about everything now, as if he was rediscovering the world without the filter of tactical assessments and threat evaluations. I received a message from Admiral Stone today, Ethan said as they walked. Lyra felt a moment of worry. What did he want? Just checking in, Ethan said. He wanted to make sure I was settling in well. He also said the Void Walker program is being restructured. They are changing the recruitment protocols. No more taking children. Only adults who volunteer. Because of you? Lyra asked. Partly, Ethan admitted. I submitted a formal recommendation before I retired. I told them what it cost to grow up as a weapon. They listened. Lyra squeezed his hand. That will save a lot of children from your fate. I hope so, Ethan said quietly. They reached a bench overlooking a small pond. They sat together, watching the water ripple in the breeze. After a moment, Ethan spoke again. Thank you, he said. For what? Lyra asked. For giving me a chance to find out who I am, Ethan said. For not seeing me as just a weapon. For helping me learn to be human in more than just name. Lyra leaned against him. You are welcome. But you are doing the hard work yourself. I am just here to support you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the afternoon sun paint golden light across the water. In the shadows at the edge of the garden, a figure stood watching. One of the Void Walkers, assigned to protect their retired commander one last time. But Ethan did not notice. For the first time in his life, he was not looking for threats. He was simply enjoying a peaceful moment with his wife. And in that moment, he finally understood what it meant to be at peace.